The third book, which I want to introduce in this spotlight session, gives some more information about the sorts of things which James Ward was interested in, and is also an interesting book in terms of his life. So we saw that James Ward has a great interest in local history, but there are also some books in the collection which reveal his interest in other aspects of history, travel and history from further afield. This book, which is another rather lovely edition, bound in purple here with the gilt ship on the front and very decorative spine and decorative embossing on the covers, is... Let me see, there we are. So this book is the journal of 3 voyages along the coast of China in 1831, 1832 and 1833, with notices of Siam, which is obviously now Thailand, Korea and the Luchu Islands, which are the Ryukyu Islands of Japan. This is by Charles Gutzlaff, to which is prefixed an introductory essay on the policy, religion, etc. of China by the Reverend W. Ellis. Okay, now this is the 3rd edition. Issued, it doesn't have a publication date on it, but we think it was probably issued around about 1840. Now, the author was a German Lutheran missionary, Karl Gutzlaff, anglicised as Charles Gutzlaff here. He lived from 1803 to 1851, and he undertook missions to various places in East Asia in the early 19th century. For instance, he also worked on a Chinese translation of the Bible, and he set up a school in China for so-called native missionaries who could travel and preach in the interior of the country where foreigners were unwelcome. In addition to this, he had some diplomatic roles whilst he was out in China. He was the interpreter to the British during the First Opium War in 1839 to 1842, and he also became the Chinese Secretary of Hong Kong from 1842 onwards. He was renowned within the missionary circles for his attempts at integration into the places where he was taking his missionary work. For example, it was well known that he would adopt local costume wherever he was going, and this is shown in the frontispiece of the book here. This is Karl Gutzlaff, dressed in Fijian costume. Now, this book, as I say, is the 3rd edition of this particular work. We also have a copy of the 1st edition in the Bromley House collection. It was published in 1834, and it doesn't have an introduction to it. As I say, the 3rd edition includes a preface, an essay at the beginning on the religion and situation in China by Reverend W. Ellis. Now, Reverend William Ellis, who lived from 1794 to 1872, was also a missionary, but he was a missionary to other parts of the world. He took his missions to Hawaii and Madagascar, for instance. By 1832, William Ellis was the Chief Foreign Secretary of the London Missionary Society, so he was quite an important name within missionary circles. Now, as I say, this book is interesting as an example of James Ward's interest in travel and the history of places further abroad than local history. And also, as a book, it's an interesting example of the market for books bringing exotic travel to Western audiences in the mid-19th century. And, of course, for their tendency to be rooted in Christian missionary work. However, this volume is also interesting in relation to the life of James Ward himself, as I say, because on the frontispiece there is an inscription which reads, "Presented to Master J. Ward on his leaving school by his affectionate friend and tutor, Gregory Porter, Midsummer 1865. So this was a gift that was given to James Ward when he left school at the age of 14. The school in question was Cleveland House Academy in Nottingham, which was run by Gregory Porter. And interestingly, in the census from 1861, within Cleveland House on the night of the census taking, was Gregory Porter with his wife and his infant son, and 8 male boarders who were aged between 8 and 19. Now, none of those male boarders was James Ward, and as we know, James Ward left the school in 1865, so it's possible that he may have been actually a member of the school in 1861, but he wasn't within the house on the night of the census, so maybe the school took day boys as well as having boarders. However, either way, James Ward must have had something of an affection for his tutor, held him in quite high esteem, because on the following page he has stuck in a little note basically dedicating the book to Gregory Porter. It says, "In loving remembrance of Gregory Porter, who died on Thursday, August the 29th, 1889, in his 61st year." So this was 24 years after this book was presented to James Ward. So clearly his memories of his tutor were sufficiently affectionate to incite him to post this little dedication into the front of the book.